Wir besprechen heute den Konjunktiv 1 und wir machen das kurz und knapp, short and painless, kind of like. Wir haben schon den Konjunktiv 2 besprochen, ja, und Konjunktiv 2 zur Erinnerung war entweder ein Verb mit dem Hilfsverb würden, ja, ich würde nach Deutschland reisen zum Beispiel, ja, das war Konjunktiv 2, ja, oder ich reiste nach Deutschland, das wäre Konjunktiv 2. Ja, aber jetzt geht es um Konjunktiv 1. Und Konjunktiv 1 benutzen wir in der indirekten Rede. Ja, nicht die direkte Rede, sondern die indirekte Rede. Und wir finden Konjunktiv 1 in der Zeitung und in Berichten, hauptsächlich. Ja, primarily. We'll find them in newspapers or in reports. Okay, the subjunctive one. Wenn wir den Konjunktiv 1 benutzen, ja, dann distanzieren wir uns von dem, was gesagt wird. So we're kind of distancing ourselves from what is being said when we're using subjunctive 1. Okay, so it's kind of like saying something but not wanting to take on any responsibility of the content of what you're saying. That's basically why you're finding it in newspapers, right? Because if you're a newspaper or a journalist, you don't want to get sued for saying, oh, sagte, dass krank ist. Yeah, he said that he is sick. You want to say, you kind of just portraying that assumption that, okay? So that's the notion of the subjunctive one, okay? So for that, lies und lern Seite 139 bis 140 in Station 5 und Grim Grammar, ja, und zwar hier coralutexas.edu ggr vsub_04.html is Konjunktiv 1. So read through this to make sure, the more the better. The more instruction you get, the better it is. Okay, so here you also can go back to subjunctive 2, Konjunktiv 2, if you forgot what that was all about. But let's have a brief look just to remind you, I mean. So we either used the forming the past subjunctive using the hätte the participle, modal verb and verb infinitive, and the wäre past participle. So past subjunctive with hätte we had, okay, this was the past subjunctive, so keep that in mind too. Okay, so, and then here with wäre plus the subjunctive plus the past participle. So for subjunctive 1 in this case, subjunctive 2, I'm sorry. And you probably feel the same way. It's kind of confusing, but once you wrap your head around it, you actually get it. So let me make my mistakes, and then hopefully you will not do the same mistake. So make sure you get the differentiation clear. So we had subjunctive 2 of the past, which is this one, the past subjunctive 2. And then if we go for verbs, we can look for the other subjunctive. Miscellaneous should be somewhere. Here, Konjunktiv 2 im Präsens. We had that one too, right? So in the present tense, with the hypothetical statements, with the würde, yeah, but also with hätte and wäre. So that's sometimes a little confusing, yeah. But you got it from the last class, and you still have the video to go back and check it out. There were some verbs that just like to be used in a certain subjunctive form, such as geben. Ja, gäbe. Then we have haben and sein. We have werden, where we have the würde, yeah, and wissen, and also the modal verbs. Remember, this was on quiz number 1, where I asked which verbs are usually, used in the subjunctive 2. We have geben, we have wissen, we have haben and sein, we have the modal verbs, and then, of course, the combination of würde plus an infinitive. So review that if you're still completely unclear on what I'm saying, and test yourself on the activity here as well. But let's go back to Konjunktiv 1, subjunctive 1. So, let's compare. You may want to take a break and first read those pages and the Grim Grammar part. But if you feel okay, then go ahead. You can also always go back. So let's compare. Vergleiche. Goethe sagte, das Leben ist gut. Versus Goethe sagte, dass das Leben gut sei. Where do we have the subjunctive, the Konjunktiv 1? What do you think? Exactly. Here, right? There is a subjunctive right here. Here we have direct speech, direkte Rede. And as we set up here, we use subjunctive 1 for indirekte Rede. So, indirekte Rede down here. Okay? Das hier ist direkte Rede, indirekte Rede. Hier ist Indikativ, and we use just to be. And here we use its equivalent in the subjunctive form, and it's kicked to the end because of das. So, schauen wir mal. To be is a very, very, very important verb, yeah, that's used in the subjunctive one. So, actually, it's the only verb. Nur das Verb sein ist im Konjunktiv 1 noch in allen Formen üblich. So here, ich sei, du seist, and some people still say seiest, because that's the proper way, so to speak. Yeah, that's the old German way where we have the E inserted here. And then we have sei, wir seien, ihr seiet, sie seien. Okay, so this is the conjugation of to be, of sein, in the subjunctive one. So hier haben wir eine Anzeige. Bier ist gut, sagt der Arzt. So here we would have the direct speech of the doctor. The doctor says, this is the direct speech part. We don't have apostrophes this time, but you could imagine them. But it's the voice of the doctor here. And then in the subjunctive, in the Konjunktiv 1, der Arzt sagt, dass, and you all saw my error here, double S, it should be, because it's not das Bier. We're saying das Bier gut sei. That beer was good. Yeah. Could add, dass das Bier gut sei. Sorry about that error, but maybe that helps you remember. We have, the doctor says that the beer was good. So sei, we don't say ist, because if you would say ist, then we don't have the voice. Then we want to have the Konjunktiv, which is kind of a voice changer. Yeah, it changes the mood in our voice, in our what we're saying. Okay, so we do not want to have ist. It's sei. So, bei allen anderen Verben verwenden wir Konjunktiv 1 meist nur noch in der dritten Person Singular. Ja. Dazu müssen wir nur das N vom Infinitiv entfernen. So, zum Beispiel haben. We take off the N, habe. Schreiben, we take off the N, schreibe. Sagen, we take off the N, sage. Finden, we take off the N, finde. Ja? So, es habe $300 gekostet. Ja? So we're saying that something had cost $300, but we're saying es habe. We're not saying es hat. We're not saying it did cost that much. Just saying that it might have cost that much. And we're kind of distancing ourselves from that actual meaning of the sentence and making it less valid in a way, just to be on the safe side. If I say, schreibt 3 Briefe, but he didn't really write 3 letters. He writes 3 letters, but he didn't really do that. But I'm saying, sagte, schreibt 3 Briefe. That would mean I was 100% sure that that's what he did. And then people might, be getting at me for saying that about him doing. How do I know it's him, right? So distancing myself from that truth, I add the E. Sagte, schreibe 3 Briefe. He said he was writing 3 letters. Okay? So same thing with all the others. So we, instead of making it third person singular in the Indikativ, which is hat, schreibt, sagt, findet, we take off just from the infinitive the N to form the Konjunktiv 1. So, in der zweiten Person unterscheiden sich Konjunktiv 1 und Indikativ dadurch, dass beim Konjunktiv 1 vor der Endung ein E steht. So, you've seen that already, probably in texts or somewhere else, that there might be an E in between the stem and the ending. That is actually a subjunctive. We don't have that here, which is the Indikativ form, just a basic form. Du träumst viel. You dream a lot. sagte, du träumest viel. He said you dreamed a lot. Yeah, so we really get that assumption in a way in the word by adding the E. Now, we're not saying he said you would dream a lot, because that would be like a wish or hypothesis. But we're talking about something that happened or something that's happening. We're reporting about it, but we're distancing ourselves from the message. Okay? Oft bevorzugen wir in der zweiten Person aber Konjunktiv 2 anstelle von Konjunktiv 1. So there you get into the little blurry side of everything. So in German we'd like to prefer second person for the second person, the subjunctive 2 instead of subjunctive 1. So that's where they both kind of mix up, and that's really just to make the differentiation between Indikativ and Konjunktiv clear. Okay? So just be aware of that as well. Und dann für die erste Person Einzahl, ja, Singular, ich, sowie die erste und dritte Person Plural, wir und sie, unterscheidet sich der Konjunktiv 1 nicht vom Indikativ. Deshalb müssen wir für diese Personen Konjunktiv 2 verwenden. Okay, we see this in this one. We're using actually subjunctive 2, even though it's subjunctive 1. And that's where it gets a little bit iffy. And here we actually have a subjunctive 2. Example, ging ich stets 10 ins Bett, wäre ich immer hübsch und nett, right? We have two forms of the subjunctive 2. Just as a comparison, remember how that's formed, and remember that you might have, you know, the subjunctive 2 also when we're actually using indirect speech and using Konjunktiv 1. That's where it gets a little bit complicated, but you just have to understand subjunctive 2 first to understand subjunctive 1. So go back in Station 4 if you're still unclear. Re-watch the video on subjunctive 2, redo some of the activities. You gotta have that straight, and then you can really move on and get subjunctive 1 clear. So let's try this. And I want you to post your answers in the forum Konjunktiv 1. So in speaking, many Germans merely use the indicative mood to report what is being said or asked. Change the following sentences from direct discourse to indirect discourse. Remember to use das for statements, ob for yes-no questions, and the appropriate question word was, wann, etc. for other questions. Remember also that these are kickers. For example, zum Beispiel, the direct speech is, ich bin krank. So now he said, or he says, that he is sick. Okay? Sagt, dass krank sei. So first of all, and you're lucky, you're already given the introducer for the indirect speech. Yeah, he said, or he says, she says, whatever, or us, we say, whatever, they say, comma, and then the kicker right here, which kicks the subjunctive 1 form to the end. It's not das all the time, as you've read in the instruction. It can also be ob, and it can be a question word that is fitting to the situation. So you really got to understand those sentences first, right here, in order to then make their equivalents in the subjunctive 1 form. So first thing I would suggest doing, I would go in and say, okay, where are my verbs? Aha, here's my verb. Aha, here's my verb. Oops. Oh no, it erased everything. So I suggest going here, underline all my words, all my verbs, I should say, not just words, they're verbs. Ooh, here we have 2 verbs. How does that work again? Well, let me mark both of them first, just to make sure. So, here is verb second, so that means it's just a regular statement. Yeah? So haben needs to be in the subjunctive form. And we're saying, ich habe heute keine Zeit. That's just a statement, right? Yeah, it is. So we're using the equivalent kicker for that. Wie fühlt sich heute? Oh, here we have to watch out. We actually have a question. And we also have a question word. So we probably just have to use this question word right here. Then the next one, oh, that's an actual question. Didn't we say something with question? Oh, a yes-no question. Is that a yes-no question? Yes, it is. So I know what I need to use right here. Then here, soll länger schlafen. That's a statement, right? Yeah. Now I have to think about what to... Oh, that's just simple. This one is the conjugated one, so this one has to be in the Konjunktiv 1, and this one precedes it because the conjugated verb is kicked to the very end. Okay, got that. This is a question again. Is it a question word question? No. Gehen is used as the question word. So it's a yes-no question. Okay, that makes sense. And then the next one, ich möchte ein Eis. That's a statement. Very clear. Gibt es noch Kaffee? That's a question. Yes, no. All right, that makes sense. So accordingly, you plug in first your kickers, your conjunctions. And then you want to look at the verb that you're using, the conjugated verbs, and put those into the subjunctive 1 and the conjunctive 1 forms. And then you put that at the very end, and then you enter the rest back in the sentence. There you go. So please post your answers to the forum Konjunktiv 1. The next Responsaktivität is to go to the Grimm grammar for subjunctive 1 and read through this and do the grammar activities and report your score and errors, if any, in the forum. Leave a self-reflective remark explaining, if you can, your errors or pose a question to receive help. If you did the activity multiple times, please say how often. Okay, so that's subjunctive 1, and I'll let you get started on that.